What is good, everybody? Welcome to the Gold Standard Podcast. I am Rob Stats Guerrera. He is Levin Black. Levin, it's Eagles week and it's Thursday.
Yeah, it's Eagles week. Great. It's Thursday. That means I have to talk to you. Not so great, but
Oh, please.
we make. Actually, I'm in great moods. I gotta say, I have a homemade latte. I bought an espresso machine, so it's been a good week.
You've been sucking down those lattes all the time.
I actually drink less coffee now because I bought like a mug that's insulated, and so I just kind of sip on coffee all day long and end up drinking only 2 to 3 cups instead of it was like 3 to 4.
All right. Well, does that mean you're going to be in a better mood or are you still going to be a jerk?
That depends on you.
Oh, okay. All right. Before we dive into Eagles week, we just want to remind everybody, please rate, review, and follow the Gold Standard Podcast Network. If you leave a review, we will read it on the show. This one comes from PNW Claw. It's a 5-star review. Thank you very much. My favorite 49ers podcast. My new favorite go-to on the daily. Stats, clear passion for the team, and a hatred for our true rivals, like Pete Carroll's freaking gum-chewing addiction, really make it feel like home for this lifer. Go Niners. Yes, we are the number one Pete Carroll gum-chewing hating podcast out there.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else mentions it, but even my wife was sick of it last game. I mean, they literally spent 5 minutes segment of the game.
Yeah, they did.
Showing it. It's like, what producer is sitting in the truck going, show it again, show it again.
We need more gum. Yeah, I'm down for that. By the way, if you're new to the show, thank you very much. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. This is the show where you get the hot takes, mostly from me, and the cold truth, mostly from the human wet blanket, Levin Black. We are slated to be joined by a very special guest today. Brandon Lee Gowton of Bleeding Green Nation, the SB Nation Eagles community, is going to join us. Obviously, I worked with BLG a lot when I was there. We did the NFL show together for a while. There's no better person to talk to when it comes to the Eagles than BLG. So he should hop in here any minute, assuming he hasn't big timed us. So I'm looking forward to that because the more I dive into this, Levin, I keep finding conflicting stats. One stat will be really good for the Eagles. One stat will be really good for the Niners. And I can't reconcile how they all come together in my brain.
I mean, it's both good teams. I do think one team is statistically a lot more dominant than the other team, but the other team has the better record. The Eagles don't match up statistically with the 49ers. Their offenses are both up there. They're both have top offenses. They're actually tied in points scored per game this year, tied for third in the league at that. But defensively, the Eagles' defense has not been what it was. I think people are running off of last year's assumption. They were really good last year, so they're a great defense. When statistically, it's not backed up, and that's whether it's yards or points. They have not been a really good defense. They haven't been atrocious, but they've been very weak compared to the offense.
So am I just thinking of last year's Eagles team when I get this agita in my stomach about facing this team? Is that where it's coming from?
The reason you have that feeling is because what's on the line. And that's whatever team wins this, that fan base is going to be insufferable towards the other one because of all the smack talk that's been going on. So that feeling you got in your gut is worry that if the Niners lose, you're not going to be able to hear the end of it from Eagles fans for at least 2 months.
Well, I mean, they're already obnoxious, but yes, I suppose that's true. But one thing I don't think people are paying enough attention to is the Niners need to win, yes, because they still want to hope to get the number 1 seed, but also they need to stay ahead of the Lions for the 2 seed, and they're ahead of the Lions right now because of conference record. Well, the Lions play the Saints this week, and the Niners have the Eagles. And so if that gets, if the Niners lose and the Lions win, then all of a sudden we got a problem for the 2 seed. So that's part of this too that I don't think people are paying attention to.
Yeah, the race and why this game is important outside of the first seed is it's really the top 3 seeds are at stake, and it's between 4 teams. The Cowboys are kind of the forgotten team, but they're still in this mix. They're right there with the 49ers and the Lions. It's just because of the division. Whoever loses that division between the Eagles and the Cowboys won't get to be a top 3 seed, but there's still a factor there. So it's still between 4 teams.
Well, let me welcome in someone that I am very pleased to be joining the program, someone that I used to work with at SB Nation, the grand poobah of Bleeding Green Nation, the SB Nation Philadelphia Eagles community. Brandon Lee Gowton is here. What's up, BLG?
Thanks for having me, Stats. Levin, nice to be on a podcast with you. It was an honor and a pleasure always to be on a podcast with Stats. So I know you're in a very enviable position there. And look,
hear that?
Don't give that to Stats. Don't pump him up.
Oh, I have to. And I'm excited for this game, guys. I really am.
That is the proper respect and reverence that you should have for me on a weekly basis, Levin. Did you not hear that?
I think our chat disagrees, but Brandon, let me ask you a question that's very important to our podcast. Have you embraced the Woody this week?
Oh, God. Don't even explain that thing. I wore a plaid shirt on the show one time, and Levin thought I looked like Woody from Toy Story. And now
I can see that energy.
So now it's a thing. It's, I asked him if he embraced the Woody because he tried to wear it last week, but he put a vest over top of it, so he tried to hide it from me. So like he's wearing the plaid shirt again, but he must have realized at the last second, and he put a vest over the top of it. So I told him to embrace the Woody, take off the vest, and now it's kind of become a thing. People say it in the chat. People say it on Twitter. Rob loves it.
I don't know where to go from there. I really don't.
BLG, that's a negative. I don't think that's people love Woody.
I like vests and plaid. I'm sorry that I wore them both at the same time. What a terrible thing. All right, let's get back to this game. I was saying 11 before you hopped in here, BLG. I have such agita about this game, but I don't know. Is that because I'm thinking of the Eagles from last year as opposed to the Eagles from this year? Because there are some statistics about the Eagles this year that seem to lean in the 49ers' favor.
I think it's largely the same team. It's not identical. There's been some drop-off, which is to be expected when the Eagles were literally, the best team in franchise history last year. There's always going to be some level of regression or drop-off or whatever. I see someone said, Wawa sucks in the comments, by the way. That is absolutely not true. I will not stand for that. It is fantastic. Sorry, not to be the person who, is reading the comments, but I cannot stand for that. I had to address that. Yeah, I think this Eagles team is still very good. Are they quite as good as their 10-and record indicates? No. You look at the advanced metrics, point differential, DVOA. I think they're a little bit, they're probably more of like a 3-loss team than a 1-loss team. They're still very, very good. And in reality, they are a 1-loss team. And the way that they've been able to come back in these games, especially recently, is very, I think, legitimate, not just a matter of luck. It says something about this team's character. And against high-quality opponents, they've beaten the Dolphins this year. They've beaten the Cowboys this year. They've beaten the Chiefs in Kansas City this year. They just beat the Bills in overtime. Those are high-quality wins.
Where are the Eagles most different from last year?
I think it's just the turnovers, really. I think that's the biggest thing. Not everyone is a little bit of a all-encompassing word, but a lot of people in Philly are very mad at Eagles offensive coordinator Brian Johnson, because I think there's some validity to it in terms of the offense not quite feeling the same. But when you look at the numbers in terms of points per game and everything, it's really not that different than last year. They're 1 point per game worse than they were last year. And mind you, last year they faced the easiest schedule, or second easiest schedule, I think, in terms of offensive schedule by DVOA. And this year it's only like the 20th easiest schedule. So they're 1 point worse, but they've had a much tougher sledding to get to this point. I just think that the turnovers, some of them are Jalen Hurts making bad plays for sure. Some of it's been, I think, a little bit unlucky, which is, again, expected because they probably got some good turnover luck last year. So that just is what it is. But you're talking about the makeup of this team. Again, I think it's largely the same, with just some worse luck.
So let me spin it another way. Do you think the team is maybe coasting a little bit, taking things a little bit for granted because they know the playoffs are what's going to matter? They're confident they're going to make it there, and they just turn it on when they need to. When the back gets against the wall, they'll lead the comeback, do enough to win the game, but they're not as focused as last year, because last year, they were trying to prove themselves, whereas this year they're just basically saying, well, we got to get to the playoffs.
I do think the long term is in mind. I do think there's also like a double-edged sword when it comes to the belief that you can come back, because then it's like, oh, okay, don't worry, we can come back, we can get back in this thing, and that's nice to have because you are going to find yourselves down at some points in the course of a season. But maybe there should be a little bit more urgency so you don't continue to get down like they have been. So I think that's fair to wonder about. But yes, I mean, to answer your question, I do think there's a longer picture in mind. Um, this team obviously went right to the edge last year and barely just didn't get it done. And I think they know this is a mission to get back to that point.
What do you think is the biggest mismatch in this game, whether in favor of the Niners or in favor of the Eagles?
Very interesting. I like the Eagles' defensive line a lot still. There's been talk about like the Eagles' pass rush not quite being what it was last year, which again is one of those things that falls in the bucket of hard to be as good as last year when they literally came 2 sacks shy of tying the NFL record for single season sacks. But guess what? In 11 games last year, the Eagles had 32 sacks. In 11 games this year, the Eagles have 32 sacks. And mind you, that's with Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen being cowards the past 2 weeks and eliminating 2 sacks with these like egregiously bad intentional grounding throws that should have been counted as sacks. So the Eagles arguably maybe even above the pace than they were at this time last year, even losing Javon Hargrave. So I think this Eagles pass rush is still really good. It's going up against a 49ers offensive line that, outside of Trent Williams, who's obviously awesome, have some questions about, specifically at right tackle there. Hassan Reddick going up against your right tackle.
Colton
as
McKinnon.
We saw, that is a factor. And I think the thing I want to highlight too is that it's not just the quantity of sacks, it's the quality of the sacks with this team. There have been multiple times this season, game is in the balance, Eagles pass rush comes through, closes it out, game over. They've been incredibly clutch. Hassan Reddick especially has like a couple of just game-winning sacks this year. Josh Sweat has done the same thing. Brandon Graham has been in those spots. So this pass rush, when they need a sack at the end of a game, they've come through and they've gotten it.
So how do you think they plan on going into this game? Do you think they're going to try to come after Brock? I actually saw a stat this week that over the last like 5 weeks, Brock has thrown from the lowest percentage of clean pockets of any quarterback in the league, yet he's been finding success. Do you think they sit back in coverage, or do you expect them to come after him?
It's interesting because Sean Desai is different than the Eagles defensive coordinator from last year, Jonathan Gannon, who was vilified for the Eagles Super Bowl loss, rightfully so. Jonathan Gannon's approach was more of the sit back. We're going to make this team go on long drives, and eventually they're going to do something where it's a penalty or a turnover, whatever, that sets them back. Sean Desai this year has been more creative, which is what Eagles fans have been wanting to see, and I think more game plan specific. I think it's not just like you're going to sit back every week, as opposed to he's going to do different things. And I think it's relevant when you talk about the kind of offensives the Eagles have faced this year, and when they went up against the Rams, who I know it's not the same thing as Kyle Shanahan, but some similarities there with Sean McVay and the philosophies and whatnot. Eagles had a pretty good game. You look at when the Eagles played the Dolphins, they held the Dolphins to their worst offensive performance this season. So they've had some success doing some of those things. The Dolphins obviously are an offense that gets the ball out quick. I think the Eagles did a really good job of disrupting them in that regard. But really, the Eagles' philosophy, I think, as a whole, is to stop the run. They've been really good at that for the most part this year. I think they're going to key in on that and force the other team to throw a lot. That's why I think the Eagles' passing stats look a little worse than they are. I'm not going to sit here and tell you the Eagles' passing defense is awesome. But if you look at the volume numbers versus the efficiency numbers are a lot better, simply because the Eagles don't allow you typically to run on them, and therefore you have to pass a lot, and that gives their pass rush opportunities to get home.
So, sorry, Stats, I'm going to jump in again because you mentioned the run defense has been great overall for the season. But I noticed just looking in the last 3 games, it's gotten worse in the last 3 games, and they played teams that aren't exactly known for running the ball, the Bills and Kansas City. So what is it about the rush defense? Do you think it was just them concentrating so much on stopping those quarterbacks, or is there an actual issue here that they need to address?
The Chiefs game, I think they just won. Like the Chiefs, especially in the first half, that kind of quieted down in the second half. But early on in that Chiefs game, that's really good interior. Their tackles aren't great, but the interior of that Chiefs offensive line is obviously really, really good. And Pacheco is a hard runner. So, and the Chiefs, I think, if I'm not mistaken, actually lead the league in yards after. Well, I don't think it's just yards after the catch. It might be yards after contact too. But they're a really good tackle breaking team. Is my point. So part of that is just Chiefs really good. We're really good in that game. They won that battle early on. Against the Bills, the Eagles had a bunch of injuries at defensive tackle. They lost Fletcher Cox during the game. Milton Williams, he's probably one of their, I don't know if he's their best run stuffer. He's up there. He didn't play. Jordan Davis got banged up in the game. Jalen Carter got banged up in the game. So, they got a little bit weaker on the interior there. Zach Cunningham, who is going to be out for this 49ers game, is quietly a big deal because he's their best run defending linebacker. So certainly I'm not saying the Eagles can't be had on the ground. I think they're probably a little bit worse right now than their run defense stats indicate. But in large part, it has been a strength of the team this year.
I want to know about the health of some of these guys. Lane Johnson specifically. Is he going to be in there false starting his heart out, or what's the deal with him?
Oh my gosh, you guys got to let this go, man. Have you seen the Duke Manyweather explanations on this? Like, an offensive tackle is allowed to move backwards.
Think about that. Think about how weird that is.
It's not weird.
Jason Kelce got 2 flags last week because he flinched right before snapping the ball. But if you actually start your pass protection, that's not a penalty.
Look, I'm not a rules expert here, but my interpretation of the rules is that you can't make a sudden movement that's going to, try to trick the defense into moving early or whatever. Moving side to side, I think, is more forward, obviously, is a worse example of that as opposed to going backwards. But in any case, to answer your question, Lane Johnson said he's going to play in this game, so I expect him to be available, and that's significant. I was actually just looking at this. I looked back at Nick Bosa's PFF grades, take them for what they're worth, the past 2 seasons. In 2022, Nick Bosa's worst graded game by PFF came against Lane Johnson in the championship game. In 2021, when the Eagles and 49ers played early in the season, his second worst graded game came against the Eagles and Lane Johnson. So I think it's fair to say Johnson has gotten the better of that matchup.
He's also got to face Chase Young potentially because Young, they may flip-flop. If I'm the Niners, I certainly flip-flop and put Bosa on the other side. How does Chase Young usually do against your Eagles? You've seen him enough.
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think that's actually, I've seen Chase Young have success against Jordan Mailata on the left side. So I definitely think that's a matchup that could be one that goes a little bit more back and forth as opposed to one guy owning it. That does concern me more. I didn't like that the Commanders traded him to you guys. I thought that was a dumb trade for them.
Nothing.
It was for some, we don't have to get into this, but for some reason they thought they had to get rid of both Montez Sweat and Chase Young. That's not the case. You probably had to get rid of one of those guys. Anyway, I do think that is a matchup the 49ers can feel not like good about in terms of they're going to win it all game long, but they can get some wins there.
Are you worried about that pass rush, not just getting to Hurts and getting sacks, but what it's going to cost? Because Hurts' one downside this year has been turnovers. I was saying earlier this week that he has so many game-winning drives because he's put his team in a position to have to come back. Like, a lot of the reason why they've gotten down is because Hurts has had entire halves where he's just terrible. And then he turns it on and looks like an MVP.
That's a totally fair point by you, because I also I always hated this with Tony Romo. People talk about, Tony Romo has all these fourth quarter comebacks. It's like, yeah, because he was playing terribly. And then he put himself in a position where he had to come back. And why don't we credit players who are so dominant that they don't need to be clutch because they're just so good? The clutch situation doesn't even materialize. Anyway, it's
like Brock Purdy, right?
It's a larger point, I guess so. But
well, yeah, let's get into that. I mean,
okay,
Brock Purdy. Are you scared of Brock Purdy? What do you think of Brock Purdy?
I was looking at how one of our contributors at Bleeding Green Nation had a good stat about how, I think people are confident in the Eagles pass rush, but the past 2 weeks, only 2 sacks. So it's kind of like, why isn't this pass rush doing even better? And part of that is just because, like I said, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen both weaseled their way out of sacks in each case, but they also are just good at avoiding sacks. Like Josh Allen, the Eagles had him dead to rights a couple of times, but he just made a play because he's Josh Allen and he's huge and he's hard to bring down. Patrick Mahomes, obviously, same kind of thing in just terms of being hard to get down. Brock Purdy, I think if you look at his in terms of his sack rate and whatnot. He's a little bit more vulnerable in that regard, at least compared to those two players. So I do think they can get to him, and I do think he's not going to have that same escapability, and I feel good about that.
He's tougher to bring down than you think. I mean, like,
if you get hands on him, you'll get him down. He's not going to break the tackle. But in terms of elusiveness, he's right there with almost anybody in the league. Like he's crazy quick and he has a knack for it. But if you get a hand on him, he's going to go down. He's not Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes where he's going to just keep going and pull away from you.
There's a play from week 1. If you go back and watch it, Minkah Fitzpatrick is coming through completely untouched. And it's just him and Brock one-on-one, and he gets nothing but air. I was like, damn. When I saw that, I was like, wow. So, yeah, that's a good way to put it, Levin. He's elusive. He's hard to get a hand on, but if you get a hand on him, he goes down. But just in terms of passing, I mean, you know, I've been arguing with Cowboy fans and some Eagle fans, but mostly Cowboy fans about why are Dak Prescott's MVP odds so much better than Brock Purdy's. Brock is having a phenomenal year. You go look at a lot of categories. He's number 1. He's not like near the top. He is number 1. So just from a pure passing standpoint against your Eagles defense, does Brock, scare you at
the
all?
Needle?
So the stat I was looking for there, I was looking that up while you were talking. Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are number 1 and number 2 in terms of pressure to sack rate at 8.6 and 9.4 this season. The Eagles were able to pressure them above an average amount. Brock Purdy has been pressured on 40% of his dropbacks this season, which is nearly double the pressure to sack rate of Patrick Mahomes at 15.2. So that's what I'm kind of talking about in terms of I think the Eagles are going to have a better chance to get to him. I'm not trying to
ignoring me when I was talking. So what you're saying?
I was not ignoring you. I was adding the context of.
Hold on. Does Rob do that to everybody?
Well, everybody ignores me.
Or they just didn't care for what you said and they moved on. Because he does that all the time. If I don't specifically respond to what he says, he's like, "Oh, you're just ignoring what I'm saying."
I think that I am not afraid of Brock Purdy. I respect Brock Purdy. I think he's had a great season for the 49ers. But I think if you're telling me, hey, would I rather the game be on Brock than Christian McCaffrey? Yeah, I'd rather the Eagles try to shut down Christian McCaffrey and dare Brock Purdy to drop back 40 times and pass the whole game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Until Brock is beat you, that should be your philosophy. And I don't think that that's necessarily right because I think Brock is a lot better than he's getting credit for even still today. But at the same time, until he's proven he can beat you, why would you be scared of him over somebody like Christian McCaffrey, who everybody knows at this point?
Over the other 3 All-Pros they have on offense. Chad Marshall says, I hope the Eagles don't fear Brock Purdy. The Cowgirls didn't, and look what happened. Shout out to you, Chad, for being a YouTube channel member and all our YouTube channel members. If you want to become one, it's less than $3 a month. You get custom emojis, you get membership badges, you get priority comment response. It's a great way to support the channel if you are so inclined to do so. I think that Brock's going to have a little success against the Eagles, and one of the reasons why is because of something I saw tweeted out earlier by Jason Ponte, who hosts our Tuesday show here on the Gold Standard Podcast Network. The Eagles corners, BLG, I'm not going to go Debo and say trash, but Darius Slay has allowed a 65% completion percentage, and James Bradbury has allowed a 54% completion percentage and over 100 rating. To me, it seems like there might be some windows there for Brock Purdy to do some things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Eagles corners haven't been as good as they were last year. I think Slay is still playing. I mean, those numbers there aren't terrible. An 84.9 passer rating allowed is good, I would say, for a cornerback. Could be better, especially for a guy who's getting elite cornerback money, but still good. The Bradbury one obviously isn't as good, but to push back on Debo Samuel, who said James Bradbury is trash, which is just that's needlessly aggressive. I need to contextualize this here because. If you knew James Bradbury, the personality, he doesn't talk trash. He's the quietest guy ever. So why are you picking on the quietest guy ever to talk trash about? And also, he was second team All Pro last year. He allowed the lowest passer rating in the NFL. That guy's trash. Really? You could say okay, maybe he's overrated. That's subjective, but he's objectively not trash. He's having a down season relative to last year, but he was not trash at the time that Debo called him that. And also, I wonder if there's reason to believe that James Bradbury, coming off the bye And early in the season, the Eagles were kind of moving him in and out of the slot. He had a concussion that he had to miss a game with. So, some factors working against him there. I wonder if he might be on the upswing a little bit. He had 5 passes defensed against the Bills. He entered that game with 6 on the season.
Wow.
He also had a crucial interception, which is not like one of these interceptions where, tip ball or whatever, the quarterback throws it right to him. He jumped the route. He made a great play on that play. Like, I wonder if it's possible that he might have a better second half of the season, if that game might have been like a turning point for him. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just a one-off and he's going to continue to struggle. But I kind of wonder if he might be figuring things out a little bit.
So let's dive into that talking a little bit more. Because from my point of view, like, yeah, it's fun as a fan to be able to watch it. But when I, actually look at it, I wish both teams would shut up because it doesn't do any good, right? Like, I don't want my team talking because all that does is get the other team riled up. And when the Eagles are talking, I'm like, well, screw you guys, like, just shut up. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like both teams should just be quiet. Like, is that something you enjoy? Like, Jalen Carter's comments this week is the one that stuck with me.
Those weren't real.
Oh, I wasn't here last year.
Oh, that wasn't. That was a fake account that shared.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot more sense. I could not believe he phrased it in that way.
Yeah, that was not like that. Jalen Carter didn't even have a media availability this week. Like, he wasn't shown on a podium. That's the case of, this is a whole different topic, but Twitter being, incredibly unreliable with, fake blue checks and whatever.
So I think it's interesting that basically everybody has shut up this week, both sides. I've been on the lookout, like, give me something from Philly that we can use. And there's been, Bradbury was specifically asked about Debo. He took the high road completely. Debo said he's not going to say anything else, although he did reiterate that he still thinks Bradbury is trash. Brandon Ayuk didn't say anything. Bosa, nobody has said anything. Are you surprised by that?
I mean, I think the PR staffs are, they're trained well. They've known this is coming. It's not like, oh wow, Eagles 49ers week didn't come as a surprise. I like, for the Eagles' sake, how much the 49ers were talking in the offseason, because I think, look, you shouldn't need extra motivation to win. I agree with that. But I look at it as if you're the Eagles and you look at all these comments that the 49ers made, comments that Fred Warner, admittedly, he wishes they weren't made by his teammates. One of the 49ers' own players saying that. I think you look at it from the Eagles' perspective. If you're Nick Sirianni and you're trying to motivate your players, like, are you going to let this team come into our house and win? Are you going to let Deebo Samuel, who called one of our top players from last year and one of our highest paid players, someone that has a lot of respect in that facility, in James Bradbury, are you going to let him just call James Bradbury trash and then leave with a win in your building? I like that motivation a lot for the Eagles.
Kevin Jones, shout out to you, says, do you think the Niners can stop the brotherly shove?
No.
Brett Coleman seems to think so.
No.
I don't think anybody can stop it. It's a physics play. You're talking about a play where they only need a yard. The center gets to move first because he snaps the ball, and the quarterback just has to follow him. Like, yeah, they're not gaining 5-6 yards at a time, but to stop them from getting a yard, it's impossible.
You might be able to stop like one in a game, but they're going to run more than one probably if they get the opportunity to do so. Stats, I saw one of your clips this week, and I think you said it well. Like, the way you defeat it is just not letting them get into the short situations, which is easier said than done, but that's true. You have to keep them out of those situations.
I mean, Tom Brady was great at the QB sneak. Nobody ever figured out how to stop him because part of it is skill. You see a hole, and you only need a half yard to a yard, and they would just adjust and go to the weak spot and how the defensive line lined up. I think the Eagles are a little bit different in that we're going to go forward no matter what in this exact spot, and nobody can stop us because you're just running up the back of the center, basically.
The only time it's been stopped this year is when Jalen Hurts, like, fumbled the ball, like Kelsey bad snap or whatever, like a fumble. That's going to happen on, if you run it 100 times or whatever, it's going to happen maybe on one of those. That's kind of fluky. It happened. The other one is that Eagles have been called for being offside on offense, and incorrectly so, because the refs saw Jason Kelsey's hands and they thought that was Landon Dickerson's hand, so they called it offside and Landon Dickerson. So that's the only time it's been really stopped this year, is when there's just been kind of like weird fluky stuff.
That makes up for the Lane Johnson full starts.
I saw a stat from Steven Ruiz of The Ringer just before we came on. It is both depressing for me as a 49ers fan, and it should make you overjoyed, BLG, which I'm sure you're going to.
What is it?
The 49ers on 3rd and 3 or fewer. The 49ers have only stopped the other team when running the ball one time all year. And it was last week against Seattle. It was a quarterback sneak that Geno Smith tried that Fred Warner actually stopped with his back, which is just the weirdest play ever. Every other time this year, it's been 3rd and 3 or shorter. The team has gotten it. Every other time. The Eagles don't need help in short yardage situations. And that terrifies me because what that does is it's not 1st and 10 for the Eagles. It's 1st and 7. And they're going to use all 4 downs to get those 7 yards. So that's what really scares me about the matchup.
And one thing I felt really good about going into the last Eagles 49ers game is the game management coaching, because I know Kyle Shanahan, or at least the version of Kyle Shanahan I know. I haven't seen every 49ers game. Let me know if this has changed. He's going to turtle up in some big spots and not go for it. And that's going to give the Eagles the edge, because they will do that. You saw it again. You've seen it in multiple games this year, deep in their own territory. 4th and 1, Eagles are going for it. They're extending that possession. I know Kyle Shanahan on that same situation for the 49ers is not going to go for it, and he's going to punt it.
Every time. Every time he's going to punt it. Even if they're in like the 45-yard line, he's going to punt it. I hate that. I love that about Sirianni. I thought the reason the Eagles lost the Super Bowl is because Sirianni didn't go for it on a crucial possession.
I agree.
He punted the ball away.
I agree.
It's fair enough. I think Kyle Shanahan has adjusted some, but not nearly enough. There's been a few times this year where he's gone for it on like a 4th and 2, 4th and 3, where last year he would have just punted it, even though they were already inside the opponent's side of the field.
Mm-hmm.
He actually went for it this year, but he's still not going for, like, if they're on the 43-yard line and it's 4th and 3, it's 50-50. It's not the 0% it was, but he still plays this game of, it's how I feel in the moment.
Yeah,
which I hate. He's literally said, like, well, it depends on game flow. No, it doesn't. Like, it's an analytical thing. It's not a feel thing.
Well, that's his, like, I feel like that's just him trying to escape responsibility, because you could always say, well, during the course of that game, I didn't feel like that's a cop out. Yeah. But here's where I could see BOG. I could see the Niners get up early. Like, let's say San Francisco gets the ball first. They go down the field. They score a touchdown. They have the most points scored on opening drives this year of anybody in the NFL. So it's clearly like not an unreasonable expectation. Niners, let's say they stop the Eagles, right? And then they get the ball back and they score a field goal or a touchdown. They're up by 2 scores. I could see Kyle 4th and 3 at like the 50 punting the ball, because we have a 2-score lead and we're going to punt the ball. And instead, he should be going for that to try and give yourself potentially a 3-score lead and really take control of the game. Sirianni, I feel like, would go for it in that spot. Kyle won't, and it's going to give the Eagles opportunities to get back in the game, and they don't need the help in that area.
I'm going to throw us back to the Oddcast days on the SB Nation NFL show stats. Remember what we used to talk about with Mahomes?
How you have to be perfect to beat him.
And you have to do everything you can. The Eagles are like Michael Myers. Like, they just, like, you're like chopping his leg off. You're like stabbing him. It doesn't matter. Like, they just keep coming back at you. And I think you've seen that this year. I've seen your tweets about that during games. Mm-hmm. And it's like, this Eagles team just doesn't die. I think that's honestly one of the most dangerous things about Jalen Hurts. It's hard to like quantify. It's an intangible, but I've seen it. I think the players just truly believe like he's going to lead them to victory, because he often does. And in those clutch spots, and he's so composed that I think players, like, they feed into that, and the personality of the team like takes on that quality. So I think if you're talking about that situation, it's like you have to do everything. You can't just assume like, oh, this will be good enough. No, you have to like do everything you possibly can to make sure there isn't even a possibility that they can come back.
It's an interesting setup, because if the Niners get a lead, like, that's where they thrive. And they generally have not allowed teams to come back, yet that's where Philly thrives, is coming back, because that's what they do every single week. So I think it is like, it's a weird situation when you have two teams that are like really, really good, that are capable of just outclassing anybody in the league, depending on the week, and they go up against each other. Like, a lot of those things get thrown out the window, because that's a strength for you, but There, for every bit that is a strength for you, it's a strength going directly opposite of it for the other team. So I think a lot of those, things that this is what the team is known for just gets tossed out of the window in a game like this.
Yeah, I would not be banking on trying to come back against the 49ers if that's clear. I think the 49ers are a team that, and this is hard to do, but if you do punch them in the mouth early on, then they can get rattled a little bit, and then you can get the game script not flowing their way, and then suddenly they're still a good team, but they look a lot more mortal than they are when they're just, game scripts going their way, they're rolling, they look unstoppable, and you can't come back against them.
The one thing we have seen, and I just cited last week as a perfect example, when the Niners get a penalty on a drive, that drive is over. They, for whatever reason, unless the defense happens to commit a penalty that gives them a first down, but short of that, pretty much that stalls out the team. Their offense is very much like a clock. When all the pieces are working perfectly, it is a well-oiled machine. But if one piece of it breaks down, the whole system collapses. Whereas the Eagles on the drive at the end of the game against the Bills, Jason Kelce false starts twice. Doesn't matter. We're good. They just overcome it. The 49ers do not do that. And that's the scary part, because you can't always count on everything playing out the way you plan. That's just not how it works in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that goes back to, again, like the Jonathan Gannon style of defense, where you want the other team to go on long drives because you're just betting that there's going to be something at some point that sets them back, even if it's just luck, a bad drop or whatever, just some kind of thing that gets in there, a piece of sand or whatever you want to say that gets in the clock there that kind of just disrupts it a little bit. But yeah, that's an interesting point by you in terms of it's not just the game, it's a drive. Like the Eagles have resiliency on drives where they'll be in 3rd and long, in part because their first 2 down offense hasn't been as good, and it doesn't matter. They'll just convert it.
So the Eagles are they have Jalen Hurts, they have AJ Brown, they have Devontae Smith. They're capable of being a good deep passing team. They've never been like a league leader in it, but do you think maybe they look to try to test early because of all the injuries the Niners have had at safety? Is that something you see them kind of building their offense around this week of we're going to go deep and we're going to test that safety?
I think that's possible. We haven't really seen that for a bit. It should also be noted that Quez Watkins will be healthier. Not that I think he's like this big time factor in the game, but the Eagles do like him specifically as a vertical shot guy, even if not to actually take the shot to him, the threat of that. So I do think that is possible. And Devontae Smith has done a really good job here recently with AJ Brown kind of cooling off a little bit. I think in part because the Eagles haven't had Dallas Goedert. It looks like they might not have him this week. We'll see. I just saw, I think during this podcast, Zach Ertz got cut by the Cardinals.
Yeah, we were talking about it. Was right before we started, about maybe half an hour. That's
interesting.
Yeah, I told him that's one thing that we should probably bring up towards the end is Zach Ertz was cut specifically because he asked for it because he wants to go to a contender.
Well, guess where he really loves to play.
Yeah, but it's subject to waivers. So
sure.
We were talking about it for the 49ers point. Do they put a claim in just to ensure he can't go to the Eagles?
I need to look at his contract because obviously you have to take on his contract.
$2.575 million is what would be owed because he has like an 8.75 salary this year. So you would owe 5 games worth of that because obviously he won't be there this week. So there's going to be 5 games remaining in the season.
You're on the hook for next year as well, depending on how that shakes out. That's 8.7. So yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of money. In any case, yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that works out. But getting back to your point there, I do think it's like AJ Brown's been a little bit quiet here, in part because no Goddard, but also because teams have really keyed in on him and been like, anyone else beat us, someone else. We're not letting AJ Brown win. But that can only, AJ Brown's only going to be kept quiet like that for so long. At some point, his production's going to go back up.
It's really interesting because last week the Niners had Mooney Ward follow DK Metcalf everywhere, and Mooney Ward played awesome. Maybe his best game as a 49er. Absolutely was fantastic in the game. It'll be interesting to see if they do that against AJ Brown. OZ of Vanilla says BLG is usually not emotional. Pre-game, this game is special, and the real playoff rematch should also be special. Your response?
I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited for this game. I think it's the battle between the 2 top teams in the NFC. Cowboys haven't beat a single good team this year. You look look at Tankathon right now. The top 9 teams in the draft order this season. The Cowboys have played 8 of their games against those 9 teams, and now they've smashed them. To their credit, they've done what they're supposed to do, except for the Cardinals, who they lost to. But like, can you beat a real team before you start, talking at all, or like talking about MVP hype for Dak? Like, beat a single good team. Anyway,
if you want to bring the Niners and the Eagles together, just bring up the Cowboys.
That's
sure,
true.
absolutely.
No, you're right though. Like, it's not only that they haven't beaten a good team, is that the 2 good teams that they've played, they've lost, and one of them they were utterly humiliated in front of a national television audience in a game they said was supposed to be a measuring stick game.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, they set up the stakes for that and just completely embarrassed themselves and put it like, if you're a Cowboys fan, what do you think is going to happen when you play the Niners again in the playoffs? Like, there's a cap on your team. You can't get by this team, and you're going to have to play them again potentially to get to the Super Bowl.
And in San Francisco, more than likely, although I guess we have to see how it plays out. Yeah, man. Now you're giving me Cowboys flashbacks. I was at that game. It was
that's
incredible. Right. Okay. Niners, Eagles this week. We talked about Shanahan. We talked about the offense. What about the defense for the 49ers? Charvarius Ward, we were talking about him and A.J. Brown. Do you think the Eagles are going to be able to move the ball against the 49ers? And how do you think they're going to do it if they can?
49ers run defense isn't what it was last year in just terms of statistically, the metrics. They're still good, but they're not like the best in the league. And I do think the Eagles will be looking to run the ball a bit. Going to be interesting to see how the weather plays out in this one. Seems like it's going to be rainy potentially, which the Eagles just had to deal with that last week against the Bills. Maybe that's an advantage in terms of having like a fresh idea of what does and doesn't work in those conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, I'm tired of it because I've seen I think 5 or 6 Eagles rain games this year. Like, it's just too many. I don't like it. It just makes the game uglier.
I don't like it either. And Brock Purdy doesn't like it. He stinks in the rain.
Well, there you go. That's not good for you guys then. But I do think this offense, again, has not dropped off dramatically from last year. There are moments where things kind of go dry, especially the past 2 weeks early in the game. So that'll be a especially important time of the game to really see if things are working out or not. But because of their ability to kind of adjust and fix things in the second half, I can't say that if the Eagles start the game slow, that there's no hope they can rebound. But if they do start the game hot, then it's like, okay, maybe they can just really keep this thing humming the whole game long. 49ers defense is good for sure, but this Eagles offense is still very, very good as well.
So I want to transition into a prediction, and I'm going to start with the most important prediction of all. Does anybody get thrown out? Because I think the chippiness in this game is going to be off the charts.
You mean like Trent Williams did after he dragged backup safety?
This is going to be one of those games, like even the slightest late hit, like just a split second late, there's going to be everybody at each other's throats. Like, this is going to be a game that could legitimately see a brawl get people thrown out.
Yeah, I do think that's entirely possible. This bad blood stuff is not like the comments that the 49ers made. I'm pretty sure the Eagles are going to have that in mind. I do. And I think the 49ers obviously still feel how they feel. So I do think that's not even possible. I think it's likely.
Levin, you know who it's going to be.
Who's it going to be?
57 in white.
Yeah.
Dre Greenlaw. If anybody,
he's going to make a little bit of a late hit, and it's going to be on.
Book it. I would not be shocked.
First play of the game.
Yes. First possession for the Niners, I would put money on Greenlaw getting a 15-yard penalty. Hitting somebody late, driving somebody into the ground. He does it almost every time anyway. And this one with all the extra stuff. Oh, I got to get to this comment. John says, Brock Purdy definitely doesn't stink in rain games. Rob clearly doesn't watch the games. John, are you serious? Did you not see the Browns game this year when the ball was slipping out of Brock Purdy's hand when nobody even touched him? Did you not see the wayward scattershot passes he had in that game? Did you not see the playoff game against Seattle in the first quarter when it was raining and Brock couldn't hit the broadside of a barn? I watched the games, buddy. He's not good in the rain. He's not good. And by the way, I found this out today too. There was a game in 2018 when he was in college against Drake where it was pouring rain and he had a glove on. He didn't wear the glove so far in the NFL. I wonder if he has a glove on if it's raining, because Kyle Shanahan has already said he doesn't change anything about his preparation for the rain games because reasons.
Because it's all about player execution. It's never coaching. It's just if the players execute the plays correctly, then they win.
All I'm asking for is total perfection, apparently.
Yeah.
If you're like, I don't know if maybe you know this, BLG. Do the Eagles do anything special to prepare for rain games? But Kyle yesterday saying that he doesn't do anything special and that he doesn't ask the quarterbacks to play with a wet ball because it doesn't get any less slippery when in the game, and the ball is already usually pretty wet because guys are sweaty.
I did see that quote, which is kind of like gross, dude. Like, I don't want to think about that. And also kind of putting your players on blast. It's like, yeah, we got a bunch of, nasty, sweaty dudes. I mean, again, the Eagles have experience doing it. They played in the rain, I think, in their season opener against the Patriots. They played in the rain against the Bills last week and the Chiefs in Kansas City. Like, they've played in the rain multiple times this year. So I don't know if they do anything specific about it, but if they do, they've been doing it this year and they've been winning those games.
I saw a comment here. Full Whites says, do the Niners have a higher waiver priority than the Eagles? Yes, they do, because it goes by record.
Everyone has a higher priority than the Eagles.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, the odds that unless Zach Ertz literally says, like, I only want to play for the Eagles and no one else, it's highly unlikely the Eagles would get him. What do you think of Shaq Leonard basically visiting the Eagles, visiting the Cowboys, and then being like, you know what? I'll decide over the weekend who I'm going to. I feel like he's waiting for the outcome of this Eagles game.
I mean, that's a fair point to raise, because why are you waiting? It's not like this is not about money. You know what I mean? This is a rare circumstance where most players just decide to go because of who's going to give them the most money. But his contract is already there from the Colts. It's just going to be about whatever offsets from that, from the new team he signs with. I would love for the Eagles to have him this week, but they're not going to because, again, I brought up Zach Cunningham earlier. That is one thing that worries me. He's been their best linebacker. It's not like Zach Cunningham is a star, but the Eagles aren't very good at linebacker to begin with, and he is their best one. And now they are down to 2 off-ball linebackers on the roster. They're likely going to call up this rookie from the practice squad to have 3, so at least there's that. But, I mean, that's a spot where they're very thin. It's Nicholas Morrow, who wasn't even on their week 1 roster. They cut him and they had him on the practice squad. And then it's also Christian Ellis, who they were having him play early on in the season on defense, and it wasn't going well. So they really made him a special teams player only until he was forced back into the lineup last week. So the Eagles are very thin there. I think Shaq Leonard might be cooked potentially. I don't know, but I still would like to have him over not having him.
Yeah, that's my take on the whole Shaq Leonard thing. The Colts were willing to cut him. Like, I don't think he's a difference maker. He might be an improvement. He might make some teams a little bit better, but he's not going to be a difference maker. This isn't going out and trading for like Von Miller when the Rams did that. He's not changing a defense, you know? Yeah, I know. Current news with Von Miller is not good.
Yeah, jeez. Apparently, John says that Haberman did a whole show proving Brock plays in the rain just fine, minus a few passes. A few passes make all the difference. If you take out everyone's negative plays, of course. Mike McGlinchey said the same thing a couple of years ago. Remember, he's like, if you take out those 3 or 4 terrible snaps I had, I think I did pretty good. It's like, well, guess what?
They count.
Yeah. By the way, did you see that who's accountable for the highest percentage of his team's pressures allowed this year?
Yeah, I retweeted it.
It's Mike McGlinchey in Denver. How's that $80 million contract looking?
Shocker.
No, Brock in the rain is not the same guy. And you can say, well, he threw for a lot of yards against the Seahawks. Yeah, because you know what happened after the first quarter? It stopped raining. So like that helps. Also, Devo had like a 75-yard catch and run for a touchdown. But anyway, I'm worried. I got Ajita. I don't like it. There's no situation in this game where I'm going to feel comfortable unless somehow the Eagles turn the ball over a bunch of times early and the Niners cash in and are up by like 3 scores. Then maybe I'll exhale. Otherwise, I'm going to be Kyle Shanahan puckering the entire time, BLG.
I love it. I think that's where how could any team not be that way against the Eagles right now? Again, with what they've been able to do. The team, like I said earlier, they're Michael Myers. They're not dead until it's like official. The movie is over. They spoiler alert for the last Halloween movie, but they like grind him up into like a paste through, like a trash compactor thing. Like that's what it takes to like finally be done with him after all those years. Like until that happens, they're just not out of it. I think it's a totally fair stance to take.
Is there a point where you relax? If the Eagles are up 17 points, are you going to be relaxed?
I feel calm. I feel good. I don't feel stressed out about this. I think I respect the 49ers. You don't see me here like sitting and talking trash about the 49ers. I think they're a very good team. I said these are the top 2 teams in the NFC, but I like the Eagles matchups in this one. I think this could be a situation potentially where we might have like some kind of triangle thing going on here where the 49ers own the Cowboys, potentially the Eagles own the 49ers. And I wouldn't say the Cowboys own the Eagles because the Eagles just beat them earlier this year, but they do give them a good challenge. So maybe it's some kind of effect there where it's not, transitional property taking it from one over the other as much as just specific teams match up better and worse against the others.
Red and Gold Niner Bang says Brock haters will continue to roast Brock till the team wins some rain games. I don't know if it's like this in Philadelphia, BLG, but if you say anything, if you don't say that Brock Purdy is the best at everything he does, that he has no weaknesses, then all of a sudden you're a Brock Purdy hater. Is it like that in Philly?
That's the sports discourse these days. You can't say anything. Like I was pointing out that Jalen Hurts after the game against the win against the Bills, that Jalen Hurts had a bad first half. He did. He had a 7.0 passer rating. He turned the ball over twice, which led to 14 points directly for the Bills to be up 10 points at halftime. He had a really bad first half. Now, that doesn't mean he sucked the whole game. Obviously, he leads them on a game-winning touchdown drive. But just because he leads them on a game-winning touchdown drive doesn't mean the bad first half didn't happen. So, yes, more than one thing can be true, as I often like to say, and it's possible that players aren't perfect at all times, and you can point that out and not hate the player.
So are the turnovers the thing that worry you the most? Because you said you're not overly worried about it. You think you have good matchups. But that was the thing that kind of jumped out to me when I looked over all the statistics was the Niners are number one in terms of forcing turnovers on percentage of drives, 17.7% of drives they forced a turnover. And the Eagles are 20th offensively in terms of how much they turn it over, also in double figures. So I was kind of looking at that like, wow, that's the one thing that kind of matches up between the two teams, that this team has a weakness and this team has a strength in the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the concerns. I don't think it's easy to point to what's concerning about it, though, in terms of, like, I don't think Jalen Hurts has been wildly reckless this year. I think he's gotten some bad luck in some cases. He certainly made some bad throws. I'm not saying he should have 0 interceptions, but I don't think he's been egregiously careless with the ball in any regard. And if you look at the course of his career, he's typically been better at protecting the ball than he hasn't been. I think he's kind of been having an especially, again, unlucky year in some instances. I think some of his picks this year were also just like amazing plays by the defense where it wasn't even like a bad ball by him. It's just the other team made an awesome play. So I don't go into this game like worrying he's going to turn the ball over, because I think he's been doing a good job at large of taking care of the ball, except there's one pet peeve I've had with him, and it's this knack for, he'll have like a rusher coming right at him, and instead of like pump faking or like changing the arm angle or like running or honestly just taking a sack even, he'll like throw directly into the defender. Like, what do you think is going to happen here? And he's had multiple picks where he just throws right into a defender and it bounces and it gets picked off, and some people will be like, oh, that's just bad luck. It's not bad luck when you're throwing the ball into the defender. He's asking for that ball to get tipped and anything could happen to it. So that's one thing I definitely don't like, but I'm hoping or giving him some level of benefit of the doubt that he might stop doing that.
My last question for you, regardless of the outcome of this game, whether the Eagles win, Niners win, will you make any definitive statements about the playoffs? For example, if the Eagles win, are you going to say, not worried about the Niners in the playoffs, the Eagles handled them twice now, or vice versa? Are you going to say, hey, the Niners beat us in Philly, I don't know if we could do that again? Are you going to have any big pronouncements after this game?
No, because I think the Eagles even can lose these next 2 games because of where they're at right now against the 49ers and the Cowboys, and that wouldn't feel good, and it does make things tougher, and it leaves them obviously less room for error going down the stretch, although they get the Seahawks in Seattle and then Giants in Philly, Cardinals in Philly without Zach Ertz now, and the Giants in week 18. So they have a pretty easy end of the schedule there, assuming they can take care of business. So it's possible they could lose these 2 and still be the 1 seed. And that's all I care about. All I care about is getting the 1 seed, give this team a bye week again, extra rest, home field advantage to the playoffs. That's all I care about. 49ers could blow out the Eagles this weekend. Does it make me feel good about the next Eagles 49ers game potentially? It makes me feel worse about it. But if it's in Philly and the Eagles are the 1 seed and they have the extra rest, I'm still taking my chances with that.
It's fair.
So my last point is more of a personal one. I live in Pennsylvania. I did not choose to go to this game because I'm not bringing my 3-year-old to that fan base. Do you think that's fair?
I mean, I wouldn't want to go to the game if it's raining. That's already kind of a tough experience to be out there in the rain.
I didn't want to get pelted by beer cans.
I mean, so here's the thing. I've never actually been as a fan to an Eagles game, because I cover the team. So I'm there in the press box every weekend. So I'm not sitting in the stands. I've gone to some preseason games in the past, but I've never actually gone to a regular season game. So I'm not even the expert on this subject in terms of lived fan experience because I haven't done that. But I do think it is overblown. And I've seen a lot of 49ers issues and fight videos and stuff. So I don't want to hear this coming from this side when I've seen a lot of that stuff happening out there as well. I think it gets heightened. I don't think it is actually that different.
If you want more of BLG's work, you want to learn more about the Eagles going into this week, go to bleedinggreennation.com. I promise you, there will be everything you could possibly want to know about the Eagles there. You can follow him on Twitter or X or whatever, at Brandon Gowton. BLG, thank you so much for coming on. It's nice to talk to someone who appreciates me.
I appreciate both of you. Thank you for having me.
Don't say nice things.
Did you see that towards the end there where he made himself get the big screen while you're talking?
I did see that. Yeah, what the heck is that all about?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what you guys are talking about. What's the problem?
Stats, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say about this matchup on the Bleeding Green Nation podcast feed with John Stolness. So looking forward. And then also, Stats and I are going to have a little bit of a question or a 3 reasons why. Basically, I'll send 3 reasons why the Eagles will lose to Stats. That'll be posted on your side of things. Stats is going to send me 3 reasons why the 49ers will lose. That'll be posted on Bleeding Green Nation. So we can each kind of drop the homer perspective a little bit and look at our concerns for this game.
So can we get a bet between the two of you? Like,
I'm
all for
I'm not
like
singing again. I'm not singing.
If the Eagles win, I'm all for you like making Rob dress like Woody on a show.
We've done it before, and BLG lost, and he had to sing "I Left My Heart in San Francisco" on the show, on the SB Nation NFL show.
That is such a hard song to sing. Like it's it's not a karaoke song. That was terrible. Just because it was so hard to do.
It's a damn shame. All right, BLG, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
See you guys.
That is Brandon Lee Gowton from Bleeding Green Nation. Again, one of my absolute favorite people in the business. Levin, before we go, we got a couple of super chats. One, Kevin Jones says, does the link hand out batteries before each game? That's just mean. Look, he's right. As many bad things about Eagles fans as you want to say, there have been plenty of bad stuff and videos that we've seen from 49ers fans. Both fan bases, I think, could stand to behave themselves a little bit more.
Yeah, 49ers fan base, I mean, they're the ones known for, I shouldn't say 49ers fan base. San Francisco sports fan bases are known for beating the crap out of opposing teams. There's tons of videos out there. There's been a death in the past. Like, yeah, I mean, that crosses my mind when I look at it. To me, there's not too many away stadiums I'm willing to take my kid to.
Right. Yeah, in general, especially for NFL. I think baseball, much different. Much easier to be in the away stadium. They stopped playing Niners-Raiders games in the preseason. They have to play them by a certain time in the day because they don't want people to have time to get drunk, pretty much. I want to get to this one, too, before we go. Nick Ellert, YouTube channel member. Always appreciate Nick in the chats. He says, Rob, you say you need a big sample size to judge a quarterback. Why are we judging Brock Rain games off of less than 2 games?
Thank you, Nick. That's my exact thoughts.
That's 100% of the sample right now. So far, I'm not saying there's no chance Brock could ever be good in the rain, but if you're telling me it's raining on Sunday, and every time I've seen Brock Purdy in the rain in the pros, he hasn't been good, I'm going to be worried about it.
Yeah, you've got a little bit further than just saying you're worried about it.
Has he
said he stinks in the rain?
Has he been good in the rain?
No, but the jury has not decided yet. They're still deliberating. No gavel has been dropped on it yet.
All I've seen so far is I would love for him to go out. I hope he plays great in the rain. Glove, no glove, whatever. I'm rooting for it, but he has not been good in the rain. And it's, the margin, Levin. 1 or 2 plays.
It's a concern at this point, but I don't know that it's something that's true at this point.
Well, it scares me. I don't like it. I don't like Kyle Shanahan just basically dismissing it. Like we've never seen a football game impacted by rain before. That's such a weird tact for him to take.
He has some really weird takes that I don't know. It always, the way I always say it, like, I know he played, but it almost feels like he has a disconnect because he grew up a coach's son. You know what I mean? There's certain things that he's disconnected from. And a lot of those things are like the reality that football players are humans. They're not a machine. You know what I mean? Like, it gets back to, well, if they just executed, it's an execution issue. Yeah, they're human. You're not going to have perfect execution every single freaking play.
Yeah. I think the Shanahan pucker factor is real. And I do worry about that. I hope the Niners can get off to a fast start, get a lead early, even if it's only like a 7-point lead or a 3-point lead, because I do think it will help Kyle relax a little bit and get into the flow of the game and all that stuff. So we'll see. I know Alex Kemp was going to be the official. I tried to look up like anything about him. I didn't see anything like, oh, he calls a ton of penalties. I believe he was the ref for the Niners week 1 game in Pittsburgh, and they did have a lot of flags in that game.
He has not reffed an Eagles game, I don't believe, this year yet either. So
that week 1 game, I'm just checking now, the Niners had 11 penalties for 85 yards. Now they've had a lot of penalties, and especially early in the year, they had a bunch. So it wasn't like that game was an anomaly. So I don't want to just put it all on Alex Kemp, but he did call, or there were 11 penalties on the Niners in that game.
I would be shocked if there's not a lot of penalties to start this game, because
they want to.
Both teams are physical. Both teams have real animosity and bad blood between them. This is going to be a game that the NFL is paying very close attention to, because it has massive implications. It might be the game of the year. I think the NFL is going to have a direction sent down. Throw a lot of flags early. Don't let this game get out of control.
And the eyes of
they don't want all those stars sitting in the locker room because they had a brawl.
The eyes of the football world are going to be on this game. The coverage map for this.
I took the day off.
The almost entire country is getting this game except for Cleveland and the Rams, because those 2 markets are showing that game. Oh, and except for Tampa Bay, which is not showing a game in the late window because the Buccaneers are enforcing a blackout. So sorry if you happen to be in Tampa Bay, but you don't get to watch what is shaping up right now to be the game of the year. Want to remind everybody before we go, Levin and I are going to be live immediately following the game here on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitch. Good, bad, or ugly, no matter what happens, it's our instant reaction show. We do it after every single 49ers game. Please, please, please join us. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel and click the little bell, and then you'll get notified every time we go live, which we're live every weekday, and of course after the game on Sundays or whenever they happen to play it. You took the day off, Levin, from work to be able to join for the instant reaction show, so props to you.
Oh, yes. It was only because of that. It had nothing to do with the fact I was going to have to travel to work and miss about half the game, when I decided, screw it, I don't want to do that. I'm going to see if somebody can cover for me. But yeah, our instant reacts, it's going to be good or bad, depending on how the game goes, but I can guarantee it'll be ugly because we'll be there.
And if the Niners lose, I'm going to be cranky. But anyway, you can
both of us
come and commiserate. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Appreciate it. Saturday, or I should say Friday at midnight, technically Saturday, I will release the crossover podcast this week. That's going to be with Benjamin Solak of The Ringer. He's been gracious enough to sit down with me, so you definitely want to check that out as well. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday to everybody except Levin. Have a good one.